call the meeting to order, and at least in Sunderland, it's 6:37. And the very first thing would be public comment. Now, I looked on the screen a while ago and didn't notice any public.
Dots, okay. I just don't know who's here.
Does anyone
Can
know?
we have, everyone just mute, because there is some feedback coming on.
There you go. I think
Good.
that's good.
Yeah.
You still getting the static?
Oh, dear.
This might be, hold on, maybe this needs to be, maybe this might need to be muted if we're now using the other one. Let's see. Can you guys still hear us?
It's much better than it was just a minute ago. Yes.
And you can hear us, David, then we should be good.
They can't hear
You
us.
cannot hear us.
They
No one in
can't.
the room has their mic on.
You should be able to just leave that mic on.
I don't know, this is where we had issues before, right? Is it
Because
bad,
we
is it
have-
okay?
Is
We have
your,
a speak.
It's okay right now.
Okay.
No,
Just
that's-
give us feedback.
Yeah, don't worry about it. It just goes to me.
Okay,
Okay.
so the remote folks
Not helpful.
can still hear us in the room, right? Yes, okay. All right,
It's better if you talk only one at a time.
right. Well, that's usually useful
That's
anyway,
favorite rule?
yeah. Now, the next question is, do we have any public? I don't.
Yes.
Yep, this gentleman
Ah, right.
right here.
Ah,
Hi, I'm Todd Lawrence, I'm from Sunderland. I am on the select board at Sunderland, but I also am a parent of a first grader and then a preschooler. Right now I'm just here to listen, and I'll reserve any comments or questions I have at the end to see if it gets addressed at all.
okay.
Thank you for having me.
All right, and usually if a member of the public wants to say something during the meeting, I will allow that unless we're really running short of time, in which case we have to wait until the second public comment period. So if there's something you want to comment on or ask a question while we're up, raise your hand, and chances are I'll say, sure, go ahead.
Okay, appreciate it, thank you.
Thank you for being here. All right, do we have any other public? We have no remote public as far as I can tell. Is that right? Okay.
What's the owl cam? Owl
Yeah,
camera?
That's the,
our tech team is at Courier.
Cool, gotcha.
Okay,
okay.
break down here somewhere. We missed something.
Let's take a moment to review the board goals, which are the top, bottom rather, of page 2. And this might be for a future agenda, but looking at goal number 1, I wonder whether that now could stand to be reworded. Because hopefully we do have a governance model that looks to the future. Sounds like nobody's interested in putting that on the future agenda, though.
I feel like that's, isn't that just kind of a board will implement a model? That doesn't have to mean it's new, it means we just continue to.
Yeah. Well, it could be read to mean we don't have one.
Got it.
Oh, and if you're remote, just to make life easier for me, please use the hand raise function. Not only that increase the odds I can see you want to say something, but also tells me who was there first. All right, let's go to the consent agenda, and I imagine Dick has a motion.
I move the consent agenda.
Once
Second.
again, thank you. It's moved by Dick, seconded by Jim. Once again, if you don't want something on the consent agenda, all you have to do is say so and it comes off. Don't hear anybody saying that though. All right, all those in favor of passing the consent agenda, please raise your hand. And anybody opposed, please raise your hand. Anybody abstaining, please raise your hand. All right, that passes. So now we go to the monitoring report for policy 1.0 through 1.4, which is a fairly longish document. And Randy, anything you want to particularly highlight there?
So, yeah, this is long, and this is my report for the ends policies, which I do every year in September. So when I wrote this report, I left in some key pieces that were in there from last year, or updated them and then added information this year, because some of it I felt like needed a little bit of context. So I left some information in. If you look through the report, you'll see at the very end, on packet page 17 and packet page 18, you'll see interpretations. So, I mean, there's a lot here. I don't know that there's anything specific to highlight, but what we're doing at this meeting is, this is board's opportunity to ask me questions, to ask for clarification, to give me feedback if there's anything that you think is missing or that you want me to address. And then you will get a survey to complete to see whether or not you feel like it's in compliance. One of the things, Lindsay, I see your hand, I just want to say, Cognia results are still embargoed, which means that while it appears that there's major confusion across the state about what to do, we have a document from the AOE that says it's embargoed until January, so it's not included here. So I just wanted you to know why that wasn't here. We're sending student reports home, but for some reason they don't want us to share system level data out, so I didn't include it.
Okay, comments, questions, Lindsay?
I just have a question, my son told me you guys are getting rid of iReady. Is that going on, or is that just him not liking iReady and hoping it goes away?
It is not going away.
Anybody in the room here have a question or a comment? Well, I'll fill the vacuum. I have a few. I think I may have brought this up earlier. Our goals that the superintendent is supposed to meet under policy 1.0 and the various sub-policies seem to me to be a little unrealistic, because it talks about what kind of a graduate we're going to turn out, rather than whether we're going to make reasonable efforts to turn out that kind of a graduate. And it seems to me that, maybe I'm looking at this too much from a retired lawyer's point of view, but when we say, for example, that we want, that our students should be creative and practical problem solvers, realistically, not every single student is going to be that. But does that mean the administration has failed? And it seems to me that what we're really talking about here is not, are we achieving our goal for every last student, but are we doing a reasonable job of helping them get to those goals? And if you read the monitoring report here, except for standardized testing, it seems to me the superintendent is, I think correctly, telling us what the schools are doing to get to the goals, but not necessarily whether we're getting there. Melanie?
I was speaking, because I know that line of questioning or that idea came up a lot when we were writing this. And if I recall, we landed here because we said that we want to shoot for the stars knowing that we're not going to get there. And it wasn't enough to say that we wanted to try and make sure everybody had something. We wanted to be able to find what we're looking at. Does that sound right? Yeah, and we're not, and I think the other part of that is that this is specifically just ends, not means. So we couldn't really say anything that was along the lines of means wasn't gonna fit in here, right? We had to say that we wanted this type of student not, and while we could not outline the method towards getting there or what it was their experience was. We had to put in just the end result that we were shooting for. Does that sound familiar to other folks?
I agree. What we were talking about with ends policies, from my recollection, was a vision, an aspiration for the future. And the goals of each one of these things, we want to do the best we can to achieve them, recognizing that, per your comments, both this year, last year, the year before, and the year before, was that we can't get there. And it's aspirational. That's what we want.
Jim,
Yeah, I think, that, I agree, and we've had that discussion before, as to whether or not we scale it back, but in a way, I was thinking, at the school level, the schools are coming up with some specific goals that they're trying to achieve in the coming year. And in a way, as a board, since we, look at our goals on an annual basis, I think, wouldn't want to rush into it, but, we could consider, borrowing a page from the individual school goals, and, the simplest one is, a goal with respect to like iReady scores, improving those by some degree. We're accomplishing other things, I think we could consider trying to, discuss some specific goals. Because honestly, we always seem to be open to the criticism from the public that, you look at people saying, look at the number of kids who aren't proficient, and, and honestly, but we look at our proficiency levels versus state of Vermont, national, and all that, and I think, in a way, we're acting as if we are supposed to reach 100% proficiency. We know we can't do that, but it could make some sense to do some periodic goal setting, at the board level, or maybe that's overkill. I don't know.
Ben.
Thanks. There may be an echo from us to you. David, I see your mic is still on. Maybe try turning that off. Is that, may have made it a little better. So, I appreciate what, Jim, what you just said. I think you touched on a couple of things that I wanted to hit on, so I'll leave that there. I do think that we picked language in these goals to say not that students will demonstrate mastery in these areas, but they'll just demonstrate learner agency, etc. I see your comment, Lindsay. It's echoing feedback for me too. So I'll stop here and I'll try to comment later if we can fix this.
We could actually hear you here, Ben.
Yeah, fine.
There's a pretty strong feedback on our end.
Okay.
We'll try it. Can you hear me still?
Yeah, we can, but
We can hear you fine.
if everybody else is getting feedback, then that's not good.
We've got tech people coming. What did John say?
He says to mute the
Us?
computer when we're not talking.
I don't know if it actually mutes.
It does. You just press it.
You mean, like, every time somebody wants to talk, come up and mute it?
That's what he's saying. All right, try now.
If I'm talking now or others hearing the feedback, I did it. We got it.
Great.
Lindsay gave me fireworks. All right, we gave you fireworks. Thank you for figuring that out.
April will be here.
So what I was saying, I'll try to be quick, is that I think some of the language choice we made when we were drafting these was not to include things like students will demonstrate mastery we've asked for, and I'm really appreciative of that. And I think we need to keep pushing, and so I think that'll be our question as a board, and working with Randy as superintendent to say, where are there places that we can continue to push and develop, more than, in the sort of quote-unquote traditional academic realms, which, we're clearly are gonna continue to push on, the public is gonna demand that, and we're seeing those a lot more detail in the results of that through iReady and such, so. But I wanted to just conclude by saying thank you, Randy, for this report. And now you'll have to unmute yourselves and I'll mute myself.
Deb and then Melanie.
They can't hear you.
Oh, that's right.
On
Yeah. Deb and then Melanie.
I also wanted to say thank you, Randy. It's really exciting to see our ends policy sort of come alive. You know, we worked a long time on that, and that's really helpful. This report is really helpful. It looks like, it's obvious that you spent a lot of time pulling this together, and it was a lot of work. And I just wonder if the process is helpful for you too, and if there are any changes, if you can suggest any changes that would make it easier or more helpful for you in doing this one.
She probably can't. Can you hear me?
I'm gonna just try this out.
Okay, they can hear me. So, you know, I don't, that's a great question, Deb. It's a good process, and it's a good process. It's good to do it annually. The work that we're doing with benefits-based accountability is intended to help the board have more information to measure progress, impact of the benefits that we're providing to our students that align a lot with policy, with the ends policies. So we're continuing to develop all of the, you know, kind of the, is cadre the right word? Like the cadre of evidence to support the work that we're doing. I will say to you, I think in response to some of the conversation I'm hearing here, the system feels like I am moving fast and hard. The feedback I'm getting is that we're asking a lot, and that we keep moving and we're asking a lot. So I, in my position, am constantly trying to balance what I understand and believe the board is looking for with the system's ability to respond to the changes and the expectations. And so I'm constantly trying to be aware of the tension between those two things and not lose our people. So we, I am sort of hardwired for like, let's go, let's do it. I'm a doer. Education doesn't operate that way. So once the ends policies were written, then I have to start thinking, how do we start implementing this work? How do we start measuring what you've asked? How do we make sure we've got system, instructional programs, services, supports, and a whole educational system to support accomplishing what it is you're looking for, which I do believe is ensuring that all of our students have access to everything you've got here so that they can all develop their skills, and we are developing, equity-minded global citizens, people who have content knowledge, who are curious, who are engaged, who care about the world, who contribute to the world. That we want to be developing all of those skills, and every single child is going to be developing those skills in their own way, at their own pace, and we need to honor that. That's how I feel like, we're putting things in place. So the more that I can say, hey, we're putting these structures in place, we're doing this work, and then when we get to policy 1.4, and we're looking at what's happening with our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders to demonstrate that they are developing all of these skills, that's what I feel like is ultimately what you're looking for. So when we brought all the 7th, 8th graders to Floodbrook so that you could see demonstration of all of these policies, that's why we did that, right? We brought them so you could see. And as we continue to develop those final capstone projects, those passion projects for 8th graders, I just met with Tracy Zano, who's our instructional coach for the middle school. I want students to be presenting against rubrics, and for us to be able to see, and for us to be able to share with you evidence from a range of students about the skills that they've developed. So we're continuing to build, but I think that obviously there's still lots of work to do, but I enjoy the process. Well, enjoy might be a strong word. I don't really enjoy the process. I think it's a valuable process. I think it's good for my work. It anchors a bit, it gives me an anchor for my central office team and principals to remind us about why we're doing the work we're doing. We got the ends policies back in front of every single teacher. We do it at the beginning of every single year. They had to do an activity with the ends policies as they're implementing new curriculum and looking at transferable skills. They're reminded about why we're doing this work and that this is the charge of our system. So, we're doing what we can.
Let's see, I think Melanie's next, and then
I
Dick.
don't remember what I was gonna say.
I would just like to point out that last year's unified reading example and today's letter indicating a month-long exercise on 20 is a spectacular example of comprehensive policy that applies to every grade at the appropriate levels, that gives the entire focus around, for at least 1 month, the number 20. I kept thinking, well, okay, 400 divided by 20. That's probably a good example.
Thank you.
All right, this squeaky here will issue one more squeak, and then I'll shut up. If you look at packet page 13, for example, I think this is very helpful, but a lot of this describes what the staff and the administration is doing and not whether it's working. Now, I'm not saying it's not working. I'm just saying this sounds to me like a good exposition of we're making a really good effort to accomplish these goals, but it doesn't tell me whether the goals are being accomplished.
How would you measure that?
Some of them are, as just as Randy says, some of them are very difficult to measure. But I think as long as these are going to be our goals, and we keep saying students will actively participate and grow in proficiency, for example, or they'll demonstrate growth in learner agency, if that is what we're telling the superintendent that is supposed to happen, then we do need a better basis to see whether it's happening.
So
That-
you've
that's-
got
that's the end of my
the
comment.
data for reading, writing, math, and science ahead of it, and then this is the work we're doing. So you don't have social science for inquiry ed, we don't have a measure for that, but the other areas we do.
Right, for example, this summer, social studies teachers in grades 7,
Yep.
8, math, so forth and so on. That's great, but it doesn't tell me what the result is.
Yeah, because we don't have a way, we don't have a standardized measure, so
Yeah.
we'll look at that.
Ben?
I think one of the ways that I was able to get some sense of that question, Herb, was by looking at some of the links, like, for instance, the 4 years to capstone, I think it was called, that document link, that shows, that's evidence that graduates will show and demonstrate, it's directly linked to all these ends policies. be really good evidence linked to the different elements of our ends policies for us to look at. And so be able to say, 80% of students, were demonstrated proficiency in these areas, and these ones, 20% didn't, and this, there'll be some more data there. And at least that's how I'm looking at that, Randy, and hoping that will be used for us.
Yeah.
Not that that's its whole purpose, but that will be really useful data.
Anybody else? Okay. Sometime this one on here.
Okay, you ready?
Okay.
So Sue's here. We decided, given, the concerns around budgeting for FY '26, there's been a lot of signals of concerns regarding tax rates and budgets and state level pressure around, our work. We, thankfully, Sue was able to get our year-end FY '24 budget here for you to see. We wanted you to have a chance to see it sooner. Usually we present this to you in October, and then we present you with FY '25, the current year anticipated budget in November, and then we give you your first draft in December. We're trying to push that up a little bit so that we have some more time, if we need it, to start talking about the budget. So I'm gonna turn it over to Sue here in a second, but just to kind of anchor you to what we'd like to do with you tonight, I'll have her talk about FY '24 year end, and then we don't have do you have any sense of FY '25 yet, Sue? Just ballpark general comments.
None.
Okay, so I'm, there are some people who are saying boards should start talking about FY '26 budget now. I put on here putting FY '26 discussion just for the purpose of if with everything you're hearing or seeing or wondering about, is there anything that you would like us to be thinking about as we're developing this that's different than how we would typically approach it? It feels like the responsible thing, given what's being forecasted, to have this conversation with you earlier rather than later, so that if you have anything to say or to discuss as a board, you have the opportunity to do that before we get too far into the work, okay? So I'll jump to FY '24. Sue, I'll turn it over to you to kind of share some information with us that's in here, okay?
Sure. I don't think that there are any surprises in this document. We anticipated having a surplus.
She froze.
Did everybody freeze? So it's us?
Herbert, you froze?
Not on my own screen, no. Oops,
Why, did you run over something?
no signal.
That was unfortunate.
I'll tell people what's going on.
No, it's the computer's.
Here at the BRSU, we just lost the signal. We're trying to get it back again.
No, it's not gonna fix that, it's just her.
Oh, is the computer
Yeah, that's
plugged
false.
in?
That's
Yeah,
false.
just go to sleep.
Was the battery empty?
Yeah. So is that micro view stuff?
Oh, it is pretty low.
Are we plugged in?
Plug them back there.
Borrow this charger.
Sure.
It is. It's not an iPhone.
No, all those things that you went through.
I'm trying to get my charger back.
Okay, click on that.
Okay.
See it in the dot room.
We're working on it. It turns out the computer that was feeding our screen was on low battery. We're now attempting to remedy that. By the way, I understand part of the reason for tonight's glitches is that the tech folks went to Courier. Read the agenda.
Okay,
Where's our sound?
so Melanie is now front and center.
Yeah.
Can you see us, Herb?
See everybody else.
You can see everybody else.
I don't know, she must use the wrong one. Go up to.
And usually it's much smoother than this. This is like about 3 years ago.
Pretty exceptional,
Down to
yes.
events. Scroll.
Again, apparently the folks who really know what they're doing were at Courier, so.
Events, too soon. Here. There should be something here for you.
Well, okay.
Oh, now it looks like we're making it.
Sort of, they're just like lining up in my inbox as I close out year end and have time to start looking at this stuff, and some changes that they've made to the tax formula, that has me most concerned, that, cause we have to wrap our heads around this stuff really quickly, you know, so, that, it will be next on the list, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, my concern with this commission and the fast tracking work that they're trying to do with the budgeting subcommittee with that, and to get a report out by December,
Yeah.
could mean that if they make a recommendation in December, the legislature takes it up and they make it, they try to make some sort of change, we'll already have our budget.
Yeah.
And it's, it's like, I'm sure that they're thinking about that on some level, but the pressure to make change
Yeah.
is gonna happen on a time frame that's gonna be really messy for us to be creating budgets.
And we don't want it quick, right? Because we want it to be well thought out and not be the mess that we've been in the last couple of years with the quick changes that have taken place.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I know, it's a lot to think about. And it's such a big job with such a short turnaround.
Yeah.
I don't know
Can you
whether
guys
we,
hear it again?
I'm wondering
Yeah.
whether, did we here at the BRSU miss some of Sue's comments because,
No, we were just chatting.
okay,
But it sounded
But-
excellent.
yeah.
Where did you guys, I was just about to mention line 2, I think. Did you hear me? Where did I get cut off?
Nope, nothing.
No. Okay, go ahead
Start
from
from the
there.
beginning.
All right, starting from the beginning. So, our surplus was higher than we anticipated, and that's not a surprise, right? Because we had staff leave during the year. We had a couple teachers leave during the year. We did not fill those positions right away or completely. We had paraeducators, jobs that we didn't fill at all, or people that did leave during the year. So we had some savings in staff, and you can see that reflected on line 2. Also on line 2, where you see that extra $200,000 of surplus, there's also some savings in professional development in that line as well. We don't budget for the full allotment of professional development because we know not everybody's going to use all of the PD available to them. But we do try to budget enough to make sure we've got everything covered, and we were underspending there a little bit as well. Same thing goes with enrichment. It was interesting. We thought we would go over budget on enrichment because we spent money on GIST that we had not planned for. And you'll be able to see that in the detail when you get the full budget draft. But we didn't spend money in enrichment in other places. So we were pretty much right on budget, which is less than anticipated, so increasing that surplus a little bit. We had some kids exit from the pre-K tuition program, from the secondary tuition program, we had some savings there as well. So there's some savings in the expenditure side of things. And then on the revenue side, we had some good news. We increased special education revenue. We had increased subsidy money for participation in the after-school program. They revamped and changed how we got subsidy for participation in that program for families that qualify. We had a lot more subsidy money than we had planned for. And we also had an increase in transportation. The state has been later and later every year in getting us transportation transportation reimbursement would be, like during the budget process, we would find out what that number was. I don't think we found out the number until May this year. So they just were really, really behind, and it luckily was higher than what we had planned for. So we had a little extra revenue there as well. The special ed side of things is reimbursement specifically tied to students who, when combined with their costs at the SU level, reach the extraordinary threshold of $66,000 and change. When we spend more than that over a student, we get 95% reimbursement plus a little extra. It's a complicated formula, but we do get quite a bit of reimbursement. And we ended up with quite a few students this year being educated in our schools who exceeded that threshold. We don't usually see a lot of kids at the school level. Usually those are the kids that are out going to private placement, special education schools. These are kids that are actually being served in our buildings, but the costs are a little higher for them. So we had some increased reimbursement there as well. So all of that surplus, that $1,134,000, the year-end surplus was voted to be transferred into the building reserve. So if you go on to the next page, you can see that transfer going into the buildings and grounds reserve, giving us a nice healthy $3.5 million. We all know we have money to spend on building items, so that's good to increase that reserve. And I give you a little summary of sort of what we spent last year, the projects that we did at the various schools. This does not include, the big HVAC projects that went on in most buildings that we use ESSER funds for, and those projects are just wrapping up now. So does anybody have any questions?
Jim?
Yeah, just curious, on the fund balance sheet, the special revenues line, is that the federal monies, or what is that exactly?
Yeah, it's a combination. So special revenues are a combination of all sorts of different funds that the schools get, maybe private grants to a school, donations specifically for spending at an individual school on specific things, and things like sub-grants for the federal programs, or any other sub-grants that might be running through the supervisory union that are outside of the general fund. So basically, special revenues, the way to think about that is they're restricted. They're restricted for the specific purpose that those revenues were designed for. And we report them on a total basis, but the majority of them are like school by school, and we account for them that way in the books.
Okay, because it was kind of a, hefty chunk as revenue and expenses last year. Is that normal, or is that expected to decline in the coming, in the current year?
I'm sorry, I missed the beginning of that question, Jen. Can you say that again?
Now, just looking at, the revenues and expenditures were about 600,000 apiece, and thinking that, is a significant chunk. I just don't know whether that's something that's gonna be just happening year after year, or that was, sort of an unusually low year.
I would say that this is a higher year because there's still some ESSER sub-granting going on. So in that respect, that's definitely a higher spending. The surplus itself, though, that balance that's sitting there,
Yep.
That is money that belongs to all of the schools. It's money that is available for the schools to spend on whatever that donation was given for, or that grant was provided for, but it is available. So it's additional funds that the principals sort of have access to help support their programs. The actual revenue and expenditures that you're seeing, yes, is higher than in a typical year, simply because we had higher federal dollars that were sub-granting to T&G, because that's where the staff were, right? If we had a staff member who was employed at T&G, not the BRSU, then we're sub-granting to the district.
Okay. And on the tax stabilization reserve, we had about $3.5 million, but we put $1 million into the 2025 budget, so I guess we kind of, for future purposes, 2.5 now, right? Okay.
Correct. You're not seeing that 25 number here, but you will see that in the next draft. That's 100% right.
So we have April here for tech support. So for the folks who are virtual, that reverberation issue, she can fix that. If we can pause for a minute, we might need to turn off. Is it worth it? I don't know how bad the experience is for those of you who are remote.
It's been better, at least on my end.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you guys have been muting it or not, but when Sue was talking, it didn't have the echo.
I muted all but like the last time she talked.
Why don't we try to fix that?
Well, that's,
Yeah.
so you don't have to keep going back.
So
and
we're gonna
forth.
pause. April has arrived from Courier. So we're gonna just try to take care of this and fix it before we continue, okay?
Talk among yourselves. Isn't that the standard teacher
Yeah,
line?
right.
That's,
Quiet.
Rosanna, or no, it was some Saturday Night Live character,
Hmm?
some Saturday Night Live character.
No.
I have to
Speak
restart it,
amongst yourselves.
so I'm gonna leave the meeting and pop back in.
That was Linda Richmond.
Which is the one that you use, is the PC, whatever it said?
It's a couple different things, I can show you when it comes back on.
Do we need to continue to charge the computer?
The battery was all the way down, I think, on the laptop.
Yeah, it needs to be
Was it not
charged.
plugged in when you got here?
Correct.
Yeah.
That's funny, I wonder who unplugged it. I mean, it doesn't have to be plugged in, but I like to just leave it plugged in. so
Herb
that it's all
donated his charger.
Well, after all, I
Takes a
realized it was a
village.
good idea.
There should be one back here.
I couldn't find
Herb
it.
had
I'm
his
sure it
charger
is.
donated.
Sure,
Oh, wait.
there's all kinds of things,
Oh,
but,
it's like a rat's nest back here.
yep, one of us. It's not my strength, April, just really not my strength.
One of these days, maybe I'll invest in some cable routing for us. There we go.
Okay, so you can get your charger back now because it was just unplugged. Meanwhile, the meeting continues.
Yeah.
They're talking among themselves.
Turn the volume up so we can hear him. I'm serious.
What did they
Turn
just,
Volume on. I mean, you don't have to, but why not?
somnolent?
Yeah, I guess they're all just pondering.
Speaking to others.
They're thinking deep and silent thoughts.
About the budget?
Not sure they're still on task.
Randy,
Who was it who asked about which settings, was that you?
Yeah.
Do you wanna see?
Just,
For audio, it's these ones that start with collaborate.
oh, interesting, okay. And that's this?
That's the speakers and the microphone that are mounted up there.
Those ones.
And then for video, it's Unite 50, which is that.
Got it, okay. And you have to do that before you go in?
You can do either. I like to do it before,
Okay.
but it really doesn't matter. If
Cool.
you do
I don't remember seeing those options while we were in there, so
Yeah.
maybe I didn't get down before.
If you do it after, then it's just in the little settings.
Got it.
How come we're not comparing budget with
But, you
actual
know,
instead of
I should be
anticipating
here for that.
actual?
Good.
Because the
Yay.
actual hasn't been. Well, actually, she hasn't closed out the year, has she?
Whose charger was it?
Herb's.
Herb.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Thanks,
donating.
April.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We get actuals in the next round,
Right, but
maybe
we're,
early,
but we're comparing anticipated to actual here.
but it's anticipated.
Right. But why are we doing anticipated versus what we budgeted?
Okay.
No, the hammer for this, all the
This is
screens.
24,
Uh,
this is the
This is
actual,
all- Yeah.
so
Oh, wait, come on.
do that.
anticipated to actual. So
There we go.
this is what we
And then can you hit it,
revised
so
during
we
the
can see all
year
four others, just
based
do the,
on non-actual.
You mean like tilt the camera
Right.
around?
no.
So
No.
Like tiled?
she gave us a
Yeah.
report
Oh, right.
in
Right.
This one,
May
yeah.
or
Set
June
that when I used to use this
Mhm.
mouse.
No change.
without the full actuals, but now she's giving us the actuals because we closed that out
All right.
But to help
July
us-
1st.
Yeah, but to help us
I
budget
think we're in
better,
business.
Shouldn't we be looking about whether our original
Thanks
amount
to
is
April.
realistic?
Can you hear me?
I don't,
Yes, Don,
I don't.
Good.
I'll be like.
you can hear us?
Yeah.
No, because
Is
the
anybody getting
actuals
crazy
isn't
feedback?
realized until August.
No?
Woo!
Okay.
Okay, so we're set to
Thank
go?
you.
Wow.
Okay, so we are back to the discussion of the budget, FY '24 year end, any possibilities of guidance for FY '26, and was there anybody who was waiting to speak?
No.
Jim, did you want to say something?
I was just kind of curious about, it's great that we have the extra, the surplus to go into building and grounds at this point. Just curious if, with all of our discussions on what our buildings need, if we have sort of an idea of what we, I don't know what we put into the current year budget for spending on building and grounds, but, now at $3.5 million, I was wondering, does that buy us anything in our sort of maintenance plans?
So it's, as was sort of talked about earlier, there's $1 million that's out of that, so it's $2.5 million.
Well, that's tax stabilization.
That's stabilization, I'm talking
Right.
about building and grounds, yeah.
Okay, sorry. They are gonna be working on a master plan
Okay.
this year. So whatever we can pull, we will, but
Right.
it's all gonna also be contingent on sort of how the planning goes. They'll be prioritizing what we can, but that will be factored into what the
So
plan,
we're working with that on the upcoming budget, okay.
potentially, but we're not gonna probably be there yet. The money will be there for us to use next year, but I don't think the plan will be there at budget time. Does that make sense?
Yep.
It's gonna take them a long time, the goal that I have is for the master plan to be done by July 1 of '25. It's a big project.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody else? Dick?
Oh, Lindsay has
Oh,
one too.
if somebody, Lindsay, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I had a quick question. I know it's kind of in the future, but is there anything that we see that could be coming down the pipe that we should be aware of? Like, I know this new tax, that the child care tax is something we voted this year, but do we know if we're gonna continue doing that? Like, I'm just kind of trying to figure out, like, before we get hit, like, okay, this is a new thing that's coming down, is there anything that you guys see that we should be kind of preparing for?
Sue, do you know anything? Are you hearing rumblings of something that would have a financial budgetary impact in FY '26?
No, other than the changes to the tax formula itself, which, we'll get into and talk about, but with respect to what is getting put in the budget, a change like the child care credit, no. What I would say is that I don't think we have any reason to recommend changing the decision that was made for that, right? Like, we had reasons for why that decision was made that probably isn't something we would want to revisit on an annual basis, but something we could revisit at a specific point in time for a specific reason, probably more tied to a negotiation process. But no, I have not heard of anything specific other than what everybody else knows about, whatever the legislature might decide. Like, when we're talking about pay and all of those other things that they tuition and all the lovely stuff that we talk about all the time.
Yeah,
I'm just wondering, like, I'm sorry, the health insurance, that just got approved for an increase, are we planning that, potential increase into the budget? I know it's so far out that you can't really know exact numbers, but are we preparing for that increase in there?
Yeah, we always do, so we did budget for that increase that took place this year. There are things around healthcare that we obviously can't budget for, like, we don't know what our staff are gonna elect, right? We hire a lot of new staff now, we don't have turnover of just 5 or 6 people anymore, so, when you're talking about over 30 to 40 people, that we don't know what their elections are gonna be, that's going to impact things, and the fact that the state contract now comes with an HRA, that has a big impact on things as well. We saw HRA usage was most definitely up last fiscal year higher than it has been in the past, and when we have that turnover of staff mid-year, you end up with a double whammy in
fiscal year of HRA usage for some people, it can get quite pricey. So there are certain things we can't plan for, but we always do plan for the health insurance increase.
Jim, and then Dick. Oh, sorry, or I guess Dick and then Jim.
My concern here is that we're starting this process earlier. And what I was hearing a little bit was the desire for the board to take some kind of proactive position so that the superintendent's office can do the planning. From my perspective, it seems to me that one issue that needs some degree of recognition is the private school tuition, particularly the rate that Burr and Burton is going to charge. I think they need to be apprised that this is going to be based on everything the governor has said and based on the December deadline for short-term changes to the way things are done. Burr and Burton really needs to pay attention to exactly what they're proposing. The second thing in my mind is that I thought as a board we were dramatically responsible last year. We asked the question, which is appropriate based on our ends policy, how do we best spend our money for the maximum benefit of all of our students? And I thought that in the process we spent a lot of time questioning exactly what we were spending, why we were spending it, and why this expense was, from our perspective, educationally responsible. I wouldn't want to change that perspective at all. I think we got tremendous credit by our citizens with a 73% approval rate, which is pretty high relative to the rest of the state, on the fact that we've been honest. We need to spend what we need to spend for the direct benefit of all of our students. I wouldn't want to change that. And if the budget has to be increased, I think we have credibility with our citizens. I don't think we should spend any more than we absolutely have to. So I'm not interested in changing our direction to the superintendent. That's just my personal opinion.
Jim?
Just since healthcare had come up, I just thought it, might be useful for everybody that, we have the premium increases for the year, which Sue's, building in and all, but this was supposed to be a year for the, for new negotiations on healthcare contract between the teachers and the schools. But the two parties agreed to essentially put that off and extend the old contract for 2 more years. So at least what we don't have this coming year is any expectation of a change in the overall structure of the healthcare. We've got a little bit of time before that's going to potentially change. From the employer side, there's an effort to use that couple of years to try to get to a better place where we can have a better negotiation when it comes time to sit down at the table again.
Oliver, do you want to say something? No? Okay. Any other comments or questions about this? I'm wondering whether
Suzanne's hands up.
it might be useful to have a 6th column that showed the difference between FY24 budget and actual once we have the final actual figures, just to help us figure out whether our budgeting was realistic to begin with.
Sure. I'd be happy to have that, Herb.
Suzanne.
And Suzanne.
Can you hear me okay? Great. I just wanted to follow up on something that Dick had said, which is I think he's 100% right in that assessment, and I just wanted to put one small kind of caveat there, which is people just received their new tax bills, and we just have to be mindful that while we've had the trust of the public in the past and we've had incredibly responsible budgets, largely due to Randy and Sue, which allow us to look really great when we're presenting these things. But I think that we have to be careful because even people who, didn't mind these increases in the past are maybe not doing as well as they were doing in the past. And that we should just be mindful that not to take for granted that we are doing the responsible thing by our kids, but also to be mindful that people are pretty upset about their increases, and that is something we should just keep in consideration. So.
Any other comments or questions?
Are we on the FY '26?
I think we
Feels
are.
like we, okay.
Yeah.
So, I think that, right, I mentioned this at the retreat, and I feel like I want to say it again, because I completely hear what you're saying, Suzanne, and I totally agree. And I find myself feeling like, let's say we work magic. We pull in a budget that's a 3% increase. If the rest of the state is coming in at 8, 9, 10, 11%, our taxpayers are still seeing that increase. And so how do we reconcile that as me as a superintendent and you as a board? Because at what cost? And I continue, I will keep saying it as loudly as I can to anybody who will listen. School boards across the state need to be able to commit to a common approach if any of our individual district board work is going to make a difference. Because if we do our part, our taxpayers will never understand that we did our part, because they're still going to be hit with a really high tax rate if everyone else isn't committed. And I don't know how we reconcile that, and I don't know how we, I literally am walking into this budget season just feeling terrible, because I feel like we're faced with an impossible task unless there's a statewide commitment.
What Randy just said, I think is tremendously important. Does anybody have any comment on that? Jim?
Well, I totally agree. I think that that's the focus of, I shared a few documents with folks. One was the letter from, or the document from VSBA, VSA, and VASBO to all school boards saying, get real on your budgeting this year. We're trying to make that point, which hopefully, raises some, there's an attempt being made. I think, from our perspective, I would be curious what people think. We also had the letter that we sent to the Manchester, that was in the Manchester Journal, and then the frequently asked questions that are on the BRSU website about budgeting and how the statewide system works. I still think that what I'd be curious about is, should we make another effort to get that word out into our communities? Because I think, it's hard to get people's attention. It's sort of complicated stuff, how the system actually works for education funding. And I think, personally, I think that our making more of an effort, a continual effort to educate people is in our best interests on that. Because we've talked about, with Bob, talked about having that letter that was in the, from BRSU to the community, getting that in the journal again, maybe a few other places, and then really trying to point people to that frequently asked questions, which is not a huge document, but it does a lot to explain things to people. It bothers me that we're trying to get the word out there, and it seems like you still hear questions that make it, from the people in the community, that make it clear that, they, for good reason, they don't have a clue of how things work. And they're upset, but it's, I think the more that we can at least make it clear to the community that we're trying to get out there and trying to explain and trying to get people to understand. It would seem to be in our best interest, but, yeah, I mean,
David's hands up too.
Okay, David.
Hi, I really like the frequently asked questions. I think that's a good idea. I support that. But I also think that we need to, when we are meeting with people, we need to keep stating to people that our budgets are responsible. That's why I was asking Sue whether it's 3.7% or 5.7%, but if the state is 10%, then anything, if we can consistently state that we are being responsible, then I think at least people understand that we're trying and they respect that. I'm finding people responding to that. But the third point I wanted to make is my big fear, and I stated this during the BRSU meeting, my big fear is that whenever there's a problem within the state and they think that the boards aren't managing something well, they decide to centralize everything. And so we centralized healthcare, and that hasn't worked, and my fear is that that's going to be the solution. They're going to continue to try to centralize more things where school boards have less responsibility. And I think the only way that school boards can demonstrate their abilities and begin to show different ways to be effective is by handling whatever negotiations they can and doing it successfully. And when you do that, you set a model that other people can emulate. And so my last point is if we can urge a trend towards decentralization in any way that they'll let us, I would start a rumbling to that effect with any of the legislators we can talk to. Start to decentralize and stop this centralization approach. That's my 2 cents.
Melanie?
Two questions, quick, just about reaching out to people. One, do we send the letters physically, like the tax bills? I don't actually even know that, or do they go to the towns? How do they get distributed?
Letters to what?
Our tax bills.
tax bills go from the towns.
Yeah, from the towns to their residents.
Right. So, I mean, I guess one opportunity would be to include a letter in there that says this is where your budget comes from, with a layout of what it comes to, or how that number gets here from translation from what we do here in the SU to how that plays out in the state, and then where the actual number comes from. And certainly we keep talking about doing community engagement things. Why not host a night, maybe at a library in December, where this is how education tax rates are built. It sounds dry, but at least it's an opportunity, and see if GNAT can film it and just have it on the ready, so we can have a link to it on our site. There's gotta be a way to make it more layman than even when we discuss it at this table, it's still complicated.
So Melanie, would your suggestion about something to go out with the tax bills essentially be to include our FA, frequently asked questions, information, and try to persuade the treasurers of the 9 towns to put that in?
That's what I'm, suggesting, potentially, sure. I know that's an expense, but I think this is a valid concern, that we keep doing the best we can.
And I wonder whether you're talking about maybe a community event sometime early winter, late fall. Maybe we could remind folks of the discussion back at our retreat, where I guess it was Representative James said something about the guise of local control, and I think Sandy misunderstood that in her comment to the Manchester Journal, because I think part of the reason that Representative James talked about the guise of local control was that we don't have local control over the tax rate.
Right.
Yeah.
I was just thinking that, that something else you could do is take the letter and link to FAQs and send that to all of our families, and encourage them to share it with people, and then maybe sending it to all the town select boards and asking them to distribute it. That might be another sort of grassroots way to reach a variety of people with the information more directly in our communities.
Right, because certainly there's a lot of folks that are renting that aren't getting the same.
Yeah, I mean, just trying to think about some different paths.
John?
I don't know about other towns, but if I recall correctly, for Manchester and their tax bill, there is no information about or links or any guidance as far as income sensitivity. And I know FAQs cover that, but I'm just curious, do other towns with your tax bills, do you have any reference to income sensitivity?
Not in Londonderry.
No, not Tabor. All you do is you get a bill.
Dorset used to have a one-pager, but that was largely to say that most of your tax money is going to pay for other people's schools.
Okay, anything else on this topic? Move into the monitoring of policy 2.5, the survey results. And I would note, if you look at the top of packet page 23, there are 4 people who didn't respond, which is too bad, 4 board members. But we had evidently 11 who did. If you look at packet page 24, the one comment was, I would suggest that the superintendent consider a change in the language regarding annual identification of successors, blah, blah, to require interim updates should be noted successors cease to be employed by the district. Anybody have any thoughts about that one way or the other?
That was me.
Okay.
So I support it.
You agree with yourself, good.
No, I just thought that, you know, it seemed to make some sense that, you know, you set the people and it says you do it on an annual basis, but if there's a change in the meantime, that would upset that.
So that would be a slight policy change, right?
Suggestion.
Yeah.
So it's a policy change, not necessarily an
Yeah.
an interpretation change.
Yeah. Are we keeping a list of proposed policy changes? I think Jeff was working on something that partly did that.
Were we putting that into the work plan somewhere?
Because that was in response to the, you know, is there anything we should change in the language of the
Yeah.
policy? Yeah.
Anything else about
Make a
the
note,
survey
Jennifer.
results? Again, that's on pages 23 and 24. No. All right, monitoring policies 3.4 and 4.7. And if you look up the top of page 26, there are a couple of folks who did not respond. Are there any comments or results that anybody particularly wants to discuss here?
Lindsay's got her hand up.
Lindsay?
Just reading through some of the comments, it seems that they're, with 3.4, Randy's, reports, that it just seems like people are kind of asking for more than just self-reporting. But note if there's a way to do that, or if that's even in our purview, but that's just, something I noticed.
Yeah, there's several comments to that effect. Jim? Oh, I'm sorry, Deb?
Technically, we are not responsible for evaluating the superintendent. That's a BRSU job. So we can contribute to the BRSU evaluation, but we're not in charge of that.
Jim?
If I could speak to that a little bit, when we, you know, the superintendent evaluation process, it is the BRSU level. Also, so you're all aware, it's in process, and we're hoping to be bringing that to all the boards in October, the results of that. Also, from the standpoint of the self-reporting, the process is included, the current process includes doing a survey of either board members or the district, people working in the district. This year, there was a survey of the people working in the district that goes together, you know, really what the meat of the evaluation process is, the survey and, you know, a reflection on the survey by the superintendent and also a write-up on what the results had to say. So that's actually that third party, you know, getting input from somebody else. That really, it's designed to be either from the employees across the districts or board members across the districts. And then the other parts of the evaluation process are the superintendent had set goals for last year, and it's reflecting and giving an update on progress against those goals from last year, and then setting a new set of goals for this year. Randy's done good work on all those fronts, and the evaluation committee is trying to get together to finalize things to present to the boards in executive session in the October meetings. So that, you know, that is a, you know, from old pre-PG days, that was, you know, the sort of the process which we updated in recent years, which is the classic superintendent evaluation, which is wholly separate from the the policy governance monitoring process, which is in of itself a review of the superintendent's performance. But they seem to kind of dovetail, hopefully, in a reasonable way.
So, in view of what Deb pointed out, namely that the evaluation is the BRSU's responsibility, does anybody feel that we need to change 3.4 to or to recognize that, or is there really a difference between the systematic and rigorous monitoring of performance that 3.4 talks about and what the BRSU has to do? Dick?
I think I look at policy 3.4, monitoring the superintendent's performance, as a way of judging the various monitoring reports that the superintendent is responsible for, and judging that against the previous discussion that we had on N's visions and the realities of how can we get more students to be more successful at achieving at a higher level the standards that we set out in our ends policies. Whereas the superintendent's performance, from the perspective of the BRSU, it seems to me, is a more formal jobs evaluation. So when I look at 3.4, I'm looking at, well, did the monitoring reports that I got seem to inform me as a board member about what's really effectively going on in the schools? And part of the reason why I said 5 full compliance is that I see no evidence that she is not in full compliance with providing us any information necessary for us to judge not only the present performance of the school, but how it will perform in the future.
Other comments? One thing I noticed is if you look at packet page 26, the very last comment at the bottom ends, it seems as if when ratings indicate a high level of compliance, the comments made by board members do not get a lot of attention or follow-up, and suggests maybe the board or the policy committee could make a bigger effort to focus on those things. It gets back to my earlier question, is someone on the policy committee sort of keeping track of comments that would implicate policy changes?
The last time we met, we basically reviewed a lot of the previous comments that were made, and I think we met back in January. So it's been a long time, but most of the monitoring reports have not made significant recommendations for change. So we haven't met. But if the board wants the policy committee to meet more often, I guess we could.
Yeah, I would back that up, Dick, and saying that I think we've made a lot of comments about things that maybe we could do better, that we need to step up on, but not necessarily that the policy was at fault for that, rather us.
Anybody else? Okay. And we have the, I just wanted to say something as chair. If you look at page 28, there's a comment under 4.71A. It says, perhaps participation from those members who frequently fail to contribute at meetings, so forth and so on. Just as the chair, I kind of take issue with the phrase fail to contribute at meetings. One of our policies says that we should try to be concise and not repeat. And as chair, if member A over here has already said something, I don't hold it against member B, who has the same opinion, not to raise his or her hand. I'm not sure that it's fair to say that because you don't raise your hand, you're not contributing. I think you're contributing if you read the materials, and if you have something to say, you say it. But we don't encourage repetition. Evidently, there are some folks who think that if you're not raising your hand, you're not contributing those, so I'd like to hear from them.
I have nothing, I just
okay.
wanted you to know that Ben had his
Yeah,
hand up
Ben.
too, just in case there were no responses.
Yeah.
I could pause if others want to respond to your question first.
I guess you're it then.
Okay. Well, I guess just going back to the previous point, which was, wondering if how we pay better attention to some of those comments, if they're not at the level of necessarily a policy change, because it feels like there's no in between. It's either we read the comment and so we're all going to do our best to respond to it, or we're going to change the policy. But there's not an in between. We don't have a to my knowledge, we don't have a committee that focuses on board development, which is where that sort of in between might fall, to say like, okay, here are all the comments that we've gotten. They're not policy recommendation changes necessarily, but these are areas where we could do better as a board. So what are our sort of professional learning opportunities that would help us improve in that area, right? And so I don't know if that's a role for the policy committee, I guess it's not a committee technically. I can't remember. We don't allow committees, but the policy group to work on it, or if that needs a different group to periodically review all those comments, provide us with some direction on our professional learning board.
Well, my take on it is that 4.7 already tells us what we're supposed to be doing, but we are a bunch of volunteers, and do board members think that we need to be somehow more explicit about what volunteer board members need to do to educate themselves? Lindsay?
I guess the only thing I just want to say is, even though you consider us volunteer, we're voted in, so I don't know if classifying us as volunteer is correct, and I think if you're voted in, you have some responsibility to the people who voted you in to make sure, I think it ties into comment before, I didn't write that, but you are voted in, you are saying that you're going to be doing this on behalf of the stakeholders, so we should have some sort of responsibility to keep bettering ourselves and having our opinion voiced going up. So I don't look classification, at least in my head, for volunteer, because, you know, we were elected into these positions.
Well, my point is, if you look at 4.7, is there something missing there? Or is it the simple fact that not every single member has always done what 4.7 says we're supposed to do?
Forgive me if I'm wrong, but it's not listed here, is it? I'm looking for 4.7.
No, it isn't in the
Packet,
agenda
right?
packet, you have
I
to go
just have to
separately with it.
Okay.
Now, it begins, because poor governance costs more than learning to govern well, the board will be its governance capacity, the board will invest in its governance capacity. Talks about appropriate funds should be allocated, there'll be training and retraining, outside monitoring assistance, outreach mechanisms, that sort of thing. Ben?
So I do think that is clear, Herb, and I agree with you that it's sort of our guidance is that we're supposed to keep bettering ourselves, but, and going through trainings, and we have updates from VSBA and Jim Pura and Melody from VSBA, because our reps tell us when there's opportunities, and that's all appreciated. But what I'm thinking is that individually, so as an individual board member, I could go back through the minutes of the last year and read all those comments periodically and say, oh, it seems like there's a trend here that as a board, we're not so hot in this particular area, so I'm gonna take it upon myself to, attend this webinar. It may not be very efficient or effective to expect that we each do that individually, and we may gain something by having a group or a person who periodically does that work and then shares it out with the board, say, over the last quarter or the last half year, here are some of the trends that came out in our self-monitoring feedback, and, so maybe these are areas that we could pursue as a board in terms of our professional training. So, something to think about maybe for the policy committee to consider at their next meeting. Because they're probably, that's the group that is most familiar with all that feedback, so that's all I'm thinking.
I'm not suggesting we want to enshrine what I'm about to mention as a policy, but my experience has been, if I attend a live or a remote webinar with somebody else who's on the same board that I am, then we discuss it afterwards, it has a lot more impact than if I just go by myself. Might it be useful if one of us is going to attend something to tell the rest of the board we are and say, anybody want to come with me?
Suzanne said very definitely yes.
Suzanne, do you want to say something?
No, she's raised her hand.
Ah, it was a thumbs up, okay. Anything else on that subject?
Well, the one thing is that we said that we wanted everybody's feedback, and if you chose to comment, not everybody did with these issues, especially the people who voted full compliance with a particular policy. These represent the individual perspectives of an individual board member. I agree with Ben that if there begins to be a pattern, then it is the responsibility of all of us to begin to note that pattern rather than assume that one person's view, which may be an epiphany, and may spur a lot of change with respect to the board. But we read these things, and most of the time I read them and go, well, that's interesting, and don't feel like I have a need for further education.
Jim?
I guess I think, when we look at most of these things that we review, we have usually a very high number in full compliance and then almost everything else in substantial. 4.7 gets rated differently at this point, which I think would kind of highlight, full compliance only 16.7%, and then was 16.7 in neutral. I mean, that's one of our lower rated responses.
Part of that is that I vaguely remember that policy 4.7 was largely co-opted almost directly from our source. And we felt it was necessary because training is important. And the language we just simply copied.
Yeah, I don't know, Melanie and I tried to, well,
No, go for it. Right, we put together a list of training, I don't feel like we do any training, except for at our board retreat. This to me doesn't feel like training, this is, do we pat ourselves on the back or not? Where do we improve? None of it is feedback that actually says, we know we need to improve. I think this people participating every week comes up every single time after meeting that there are areas where we feel like people could be contributing more. But there's no feedback onto how to help that, how to help more participation happen, right? I know that Herb's talked about it from time to time, and you commented, I think rightfully so, that just because someone doesn't raise their hand doesn't mean they don't have anything to say. We are trying to keep it timely, but we're reading this, we're taking it in, but where's the part where we're training ourselves to do better? I think then, it might be a good idea to have a board development committee, but at some point also I'm feeling like we spend a lot of time just figuring out how our board works and our committee works, and I know that also becomes redundant. Like I don't, I understand maybe a hesitancy to have more committees, but we're not actively growing as a group.
and
We
recently,
let me just remind you, that several meetings ago, we decided that for each meeting, we were going to watch a podcast or do something or other and then discuss it. We did it once and it hasn't happened again.
Right.
Randy?
So maybe that didn't get maybe that didn't stick. But I'm wondering whether or not, even if you start with something that's manageable, and if you agree as a board that annually at the retreat, you will decide on a training that you collectively want to do during that year, and you set a date for that training to occur at some point over that year. It's sort of a starting point. It's a separate meeting. It's, whatever the parameters are. Maybe you don't need a committee as much as just, not starting with something that's unmanageable for everyone and takes a tremendous amount of time, but you just see how that works. Start off with something you can be successful
Well,
with.
that dovetails into the next item on the agenda, which is the work plan. Could we put on the work plan for next year's retreat at least, that we're gonna do what you suggest?
That we set a topic to work
Yeah.
on for the year,
Yeah,
like
Or
our
training,
own goals,
have
or
a
training, right?
yeah.
John's got his hand up.
John?
I don't know if you want to discuss that as a board or.
Yeah, I suggest that if we feel strongly enough about improving our training, that we look at our board goals and consider adding, we have nothing in our board goals concerning training. And you develop a board goal, an annual goal for training, or we make it, specific and targeted to a certain issue. And maybe use the governance standards that we self-assessed on for the board retreat as a guide. Some of those, for example, one of the standards where we had the lowest self-evaluations was concerning connecting with local officials. And we had some varying perspectives about that. But that might be, that's an example of, that could be a board goal of having more training, as an example, but a board goal for more training. But if we feel strongly enough about this, I think we need to have a specific goal and one that could be updated annually.
Well, as a placeholder for now, could we put in the work plan for the retreat, training pursuant to policy governance policy 4.7?
Do you need a motion for that, or we can just note it?
Well, I guess a motion wouldn't hurt, just to make sure it shows up in the minutes.
I'll make that motion.
Okay. Moved by Melanie,
I'll second it.
seconded by Dick. Is there any discussion?
I just wonder why we're waiting till next August.
Only because somebody mentioned retreat.
Well, if we'll dovetail on, let's go back to one of your first comments tonight, is here we are with board goals and governance, board will implement a governance model, maybe that's where we, maybe you're right, we have a governance system, we're implementing it, maybe we need to make that a more robust goal. That is, now we have the model, and now we're, pursuing it with vigor and training or something.
Any other discussion?
For the policy committee to decide on the language of Dick.
Okay.
While you're at it.
Jeff and Suzanne,
While you're at it, can you end?
you ready
Yeah.
to take this on? Okay.
While you're at it, can you end world hunger too?
World hunger. Okay. We won't have much to say because we can't do much. I'm not a farmer.
Okay, you ready to vote on the motion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Anybody opposed, please raise your hand. Anybody abstaining, please raise your hand. That appears to pass unanimously, and it does, okay. One other thing on the work plan, and this is my fault, the Community Engagement Committee agreed that we should meet regarding what the topic of the next week's special meeting is, namely school reorganization, possible closures. I'll try to get an email out even tonight to the Community Engagement Committee suggesting, I guess it would be a doodle poll, just as soon as we can after next week's special meeting. Originally, I thought we should meet before then, but not knowing what the outcome of that meeting is going to be, maybe meeting right after it's a better idea.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I think it's gonna be just, we won't know until next week what the board wants the Community Engagement Committee to even do.
Lindsay?
And I think you need to be involved.
I just want to confirm next week's meeting, is it considered a business meeting or a community engagement?
It's a business meeting, it's a special business meeting.
Okay, so there's not going to be any question or answers from the public like we had discussed. It's just going to be like a meeting like this, and then we'll meet as the community engagement committee to then whatever the next steps are.
That's my understanding. I mean, we'll have a public comment period, but the meeting is not being billed as a come everybody and give your opinion on what we're thinking about.
Yeah, right.
Just to follow up, Lindsay, as I've been working on the presentation, there will be a recommendation for me that their board hold and establish community engagement forums to collect information, discuss with the public, so.
Oh, one other item on the work plan, if you look on packet page 31 for the annual meeting, I think the Community Engagement Committee, which hasn't met recently, did recommend that we do the same thing next year that we did this year in terms of having informal meetings before the actual start of the business meeting.
Yes.
So I think that ought to be added to the work plan, same as last year. Okay,
Yeah,
anything else
Trina.
about the work plan?
Yeah.
Ben?
Just wondering whether we need to adjust the locations of the meetings going forward.
We do, and that's item 11B on the agenda.
Thank you. Got ahead of myself.
Okay, let's go then to the legislative and VSBA updates. And the packet couldn't, I think, include the minutes of the last meeting of the full Commission on the Future of Public Education in Vermont, because I don't think they had been released when the packet came out. They are out in the meantime. If anybody, I have a copy here, or you can get them if you go to the Agency of Ed website. Jim, do you want to take any lead on this one, or how do you want to handle this?
Yeah, well, kind of curious about, my thought, the minutes and the agendas and all, it's a lot of material. ideally, we'd all be looking through it, and, you know, I think that's asking a lot from everyone. Trying to figure out what would be useful to folks, most useful to people. You know, I sent out an email with just a couple of items. One, the steering committee's, you know, sort of plan, with, you know, plan for the what was gonna happen with the commission over the coming couple of years. Also, you know, I'm trying to figure out what is useful to people, and I'd appreciate any sort of feedback. One thing that I have now that I was gonna send out, I'll probably move, if everybody thinks it makes sense and all, I'll send out, the Agency of Education they used on their last meeting on the 26th, the interim Secretary of Education presented a bunch of data with respect to schools that, can I grab that back for a second?
Sure.
They, it's pretty useful, and it also, there are a few things that came to my mind that I think we should be trying to have some input into this whole process. We can through Melanie and I with the VSBA, but the Agency of Education presented this document that I'll send out to you guys. It's 28 pages long, but a lot of it's graphs and stuff like that. And it looks at the Vermont education system from the standpoint of enrollment, and where that's going, demographics, and where that's going, student outcomes, staffing, and expenditures. It has a lot of good data. It has a few shortfalls too that I think come up. The commission is discussing that, and I think this is sort of a baseline document that the Agency of Education is sort of giving their input into what areas might be looked at by the commission, you know, by having things like staffing and size of supervisory unions, and looking at student achievement against some of those indicators. So I think they're, you know, kind of putting their input into where because they are support for the commission. You know, they're providing data that the commission is going to use to try to come up with some recommendations, and the commission needs to come up with their short-term recommendations by December. So really not, you know, that's not far off, but that December is so that when the legislature walks in January, they can start thinking about what they might want to change. Which, as has already been pointed out, is wonderful timing from the standpoint of our budgeting process, but will make things, you know, sort of difficult. But we need to, I think if we follow the commission, I think it makes sense to try to follow it from the perspective of what direction do they seem to be going that's going to impact what we're doing in our budgeting for the year. So that's, I've got a little bit of an insight to it just from being on the BSBA executive committee, and I'll try to provide info to you guys, but it's really helpful as you see all the material that was in this package, and I sent you just a couple of items. I'll send you this document, which is, I think,
It's good.
really good information for everybody. But I welcome any input as to what is useful or what is overkill, or, you know, how, you know, I think Melanie and I at VSBA, and actually Randy with VSA, you know, total tie into it as well, and Sue at VASBO, we're gonna be trying to figure out, you know, read the tea leaves a little bit and pass that along, but, you know, if we're sending you something that's useful, or sending you stuff that isn't useful, or, you know, whatever, give us input, you know, feel free.
And I'll just would love feedback. we included all this information, the agendas, the meeting minutes, from anything we could. Is that useful to you? Do you want us to continue doing that in monthly packets? I would like feedback and direction from the board on that. We weren't entirely sure what you wanted, so we put everything in, but feedback from you about whether to continue that or not would be helpful.
Thoughts? Melanie?
I appreciate it in the packet. I think it makes it very
Yeah.
clear.
I
It gives us
appreciate it.
opportunity to discuss it, right?
I appreciate it. The only thing is, we may not need agendas for the meeting, for the minutes, for which minutes are available.
It would be, from my perspective, very useful to continue until we find out whether the minutes that are actually taken are effective summaries, so that when it's time to get really involved, I and others can make a choice to actually go ahead and attend.
Ben and I sat through the last meeting of the full commission, was just a couple of days ago, and I now have read the minutes, and I think they're pretty comprehensive, but I'd like Ben's opinion too. And some of us should probably try to attend a few more and compare the minutes to see whether the completeness of the last minutes is a fluke or whether it's something we can rely on.
And they are recorded, right?
They are recorded, yeah, but they're 3-hour meetings, so
Yeah.
have to have some patience. Anything else on that topic? Future agenda items, I have one. Andy Dahlstrom sent an email, I think it was earlier today, was it?
Yes.
Saying he's resigning. According to state statute, when a member resigns, we have only 30 days to appoint somebody else. We could theoretically do it because our next regular meeting is the 1st of October, which is less than 30 days from now. But because the vacancy will be in Peru, I'm wondering how realistic it is to expect we're going to find somebody we can appoint in the next month, roughly. And whether I should perhaps encourage Andy to make his resignation effective, let's say, the 1st of October, to give us another month.
I don't see any reason why we shouldn't try that. I mean, can we not pursue, if he doesn't resign the 1st, is there anything that would keep us from pursuing someone else this month, right now?
No,
Okay.
because we would know.
We're
he
just
was going
buying
to resign,
ourselves
yeah,
an extra month.
Yeah. What's your pleasure on that? Do you want to commit to finding somebody by the 1st of October, or do you want me to see if I can buy us some more time? Lindsay?
I must have missed it. Is he an at-large or is he a specific town seat?
We're all at large. The only
He's from
difference
Peru.
is that the 4 biggest towns get between them 4 additional members. Everyone represents every town.
He's the only Peru member.
But we
Right,
need a Peru
He's the member
member.
from Peru,
Yes.
not for Peru, but from Peru. So again, as I recall, last time we had a resignation, it was pretty iffy whether we were going to find somebody in time from Peru, wasn't it?
Yes,
It says it was.
you got
Deb?
mute.
Debbie,
Yeah, I can tell you it's very hard to find a replacement.
twice resigned.
Especially, when the election is, gone by. Because, people will just, expect you to keep serving or wait until it's more urgent. And there aren't a lot of people with time.
So you buy his time if you can.
Yeah, it's not easy.
Ben is raising his, okay, and Suzanne, okay, well, I will see what I can do. No guarantees, and maybe Andy will say, nope, I want it effective today, but I'll see what I can do. Any other future agenda items?
Meetings.
That's later.
That's later. Next thing is the second public comment period.
It's,
Everything you want.
since I'm the only one here, but I have just a little bit, I have a couple questions.
Go ahead.
The first one is just in regards to back in May 28th, when they had the facilities condition report, the report was labeled as draft. Is there an update on that? It was in the meeting minutes packet agenda from back then. They gave that overview of all the town's facilities for schools. I know there were some outstanding items that were kind of vague, that were we were still waiting to see what the condition of Manchester Elementary School was gonna be. So I just wanted to know if, as we move towards discussing school closures and the conditions of all the schools, has the consultant completed that packet?
It is complete,
Okay.
yeah.
Is
Very
there any
significant.
public way to get that document?
Yeah, I'm happy to send it to you,
Okay.
just, you can grab the email. We'll also make sure it's on our website
Okay,
in the final format.
okay, appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Well, I guess another question, obviously I'm here as a parent for a student in Sunderland, and we have a lot of concerns and thoughts about the whole process. For next week's special meeting, in regards to Act 153, whereabouts, and that's in the merger document from 2017, I think, whereabouts is this in the process for Act 153? Is next week's meeting just a special meeting, or is it before the public hearing? Because there's steps the board has to go through.
Oh, it's
closures.
way early,
That's what I just want to make sure.
way, way, way early.
Okay,
I think
They
we-
haven't even talked about
okay,
anything that far.
okay. So that leads me to my last and final question is outreach, community outreach. I found out about it last week's select board meeting. And if I didn't do a front porch forum post on Thursday that got posted on Saturday, no one in the town would have known about the meeting. And I kind of think that's unacceptable for a meeting of this kind of magnitude, that I am not even part of the board or the school district, and I have to do the outreach for this meeting. So that's one of my big concerns. And it kind of goes with everything. If you don't control the message, somebody else is. Luckily, I feel like I'm pretty neutral. I'm trying to present information to the town without leading them to a specific, I don't want to pick pitchforks or, all that stuff, but I want to be engaged. So that's my concern, and I would like to know, is there anything coming out from the board or the school district or?
Yep, tomorrow there's an email going out.
Okay,
I didn't want to send it last week because the first week of school, families are inundated with
Yeah.
information. And I just didn't get it out, but it is going out tomorrow. It'll be a screencast, like a virtual
okay.
thing, because I know that it's really easy, even in writing, for people to misunderstand stuff, so
Yeah.
that will be going out.
The whole thing's complicated, I understand that as I kind of go through and read all this stuff. And then, for the expectations though, for this upcoming meeting, it's just gonna be a presentation? And then,
Correct. And the board will be having a discussion after the
No
presentation.
Q&As though? Just because if the parents of the school show up, if we give them a structured 10 minutes, and then we cut them off, give 2-minute segments per speaker, we cut them off, I'm kind of concerned about the goodwill that everyone was talking about with building the budgets, and now.
Do you mean all the schools?
No, I'm talking
Like-
about our school next week.
But the
Yeah.
meeting is there, but it's a TNG meeting, so are you sort of referring, it's not just, the meeting is for all 5 schools?
I was under the impression it was mostly about Sunderland Elementary
No,
School.
not
That's
at
not
all.
how-
Yeah, so it's not, but I think that whatever we end up, we're gonna be getting a draft agenda, I think to Herb, David, and Dick, so whatever's decided for public comment, but it's about the entire district,
Okay.
like state of our schools, and so everyone's gonna be hearing, there's nothing specific,
Okay.
like, there's a variety of topics that are gonna be presented, including Sunderland and Courier, and, a whole lot of
Yeah.
Dorset, all kinds of possible iterations.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I anticipate there might be a number of families from a variety of places.
Okay, yeah, it goes back to the communication thing 6 days
Yep.
before, and, it's a little iffy now, but, okay.
Yeah.
That's all I had to.
Yeah,
But
I just wanna,
to get back to your point about the public comment period though, I would kind of like some guidance from the board, because I think even though this meeting is not specific to Sunderland, We did decide to hold it in Sunderland because Sunderland was certainly going to be affected by it. And I would like the board's permission to maybe extend the public comment period to half an hour, and if we have a lot of people who want to make comments, get them to sign up and divvy up the time fairly. Because I think what you've said is very important as far as you don't want to cut people off, feel they're not part of the process. Well, what's the board's pleasure on this?
I think that's very worth considering. I would recommend that happen after the presentation, not
Right.
not a 30-minute public comment at the beginning.
Right.
That's fair, after the presentation.
Yeah. Although I guess we should probably have the agenda to have a public comment period first, but then I can say if what you want to comment on is school reorganization, hold it until after the presentation. But if somebody wants to show up and ask and comment that they think, I don't know, we're not handling busing correctly or something like that, they can say that, say they whatever they want to and go home. Suzanne.
I just wanted to ask if I could to the gentleman in public comment, is Front Porch Forum a really effective way to reach the public in Sunderland? I know that's very effective in Danby. We have a similar type of thing. Is Front Porch Forum the best way to communicate with Sunderland residents?
I mean, Sunderland's pretty tough, probably like all the small towns, unless you use social media. I don't use Facebook. I know there's a couple like town-specific Facebook groups that might be reached. I've always been told though, Front Porch Forum is kind of the quasi unofficial mouthpiece. Like if a town wants to put some stuff out there, that's one way they can do it.
Sure. Okay, great. Thanks for that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We may have already discussed this, but Randy, the publicity for next week's special meeting, is that going to draw any particular attention to either Sunderland or Courier? Because those are the two prime possible closures we have discussed in the past, right?
No, we weren't planning on it.
Yeah, I mean, I went to, you want to finish?
I'll finish up.
I went to our select board specifically because I know that we have ARPA funds that we're holding, and there's a lot of people kind of crawling at those ARPA funds. So we are so early in the process that I think even at our last board meeting, I don't know if you saw the minutes, but there was a lot of discussion of we don't need to close schools. That's not where we're going with this. But the discussion is out there, and we haven't decided, we haven't voted, there is no consensus at all. And I've tried to make that, I mean, clearly I didn't, but I tried to make that clear that this is just a business meeting. I wanted Sunderland to know over the next year, there's some discussion. We might want to save that money. And that's why I went to you. Typically, I don't know that I would have made that move because it is so early in the process. And this presentation that Randy, I anticipate getting from Randy next week, will almost definitely be repeated at least once, if not twice again, or some version of that that's colloquial enough that everybody can take all that information in. And that's always, been part of the plan. That is how we have to close schools with all these public engagement things. So yes, we're very early, very, very early. But, no time like the present, I guess, right, to pay attention to what's going on. There's something else I'm saying, I can't think what it was. But yeah, just so you know, I was not trying to raise, by any means alarm bells like, hey, this is happening. It's just, if we have money before it gets divvied out to, this sidewalk and that sidewalk, let's hold it.
Those alarm bells are going off though, just letting you know.
I know, I saw your post and then I saw Facebook posts and, yeah.
Okay.
I've been questioned.
Yeah, and that's okay. I mean,
It's fine.
There's a whole lot to think about, and I think that the information I present to everyone who attends or views it, people will understand the point that we're at as a district, and the decisions that we need to at least consider whether anything does need to be done.
All right, I see the next item on the agenda is board self-evaluation, but all I need is if you're here in person and you need a copy of the self-evaluation form, make sure you fill it out before you leave. I'm not gonna block the door, but it'd be nice if you would please self-evaluate. If you're remote, there is an electronic way of doing it. Melanie, you wanna remind people how to do it?
Check an email directly from me, and there will be a link, it's a live link to a Google survey. I've probably sent it out every month, but it'll say board self-evaluation.
Any questions on that? Again, please, 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 one of the duties of this board is to evaluate our own performance, so let's see if we can get 100% participation. This time it'll be a record. Next meeting, we already have the September 9th at Sunderland. We need a motion to change the meeting locations. And I think the idea would be to have the October meeting at Courier and bump everything along by 1 month after that from our presently approved schedule. Is that right, Randy?
I think that makes sense. I think the board should consider that. We're happy to make that adjustment.
So anyone care to move that?
I move that we move the meeting for tonight, which is Courier, to make that 10-1, and all the other meetings that follow would be pushed down 1 week.
1 month, right?
1 month, excuse me, except we might not want to meet at Courier on 1/7. Just because we wanted to have a Manchester meeting for the last meeting as we approved the budget.
So do you want to, the motion has to say when we're going to meet.
Okay, so I would move that Courier be scheduled for 10-1, that Manchester be scheduled for 11-6, that Dorset be scheduled for 12-3, that Floodbrook be scheduled for 12-17. No, Sunderland be scheduled for 12-17, that Courier be scheduled for,
That Floodbrook be scheduled?
no, Floodbrook be scheduled for 1/7, and that Manchester be scheduled for 2/4.
And the March meeting?
And the March meeting, which is the, it usually is done at the BRSU for convenience, because it's an organizational meeting.
So so your motion has the March meeting at BRSU then?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Jim.
Where is that, the
Or
annual
Alex.
meeting?
Pardon?
I don't remember where the annual meeting is.
Did we set a place? Yeah, we must have.
We have to,
Yeah,
I
we
just
have-
don't
we
remember
did
where.
last year, yeah. I don't recall where it is either.
Well, we can always, once again,
Well, no, the annual meeting, we can't change.
no, but the other meetings, if, for example, the annual meeting happens to be at Manchester, then we could do something else on 2/4.
Well, we can always, we can change the whole schedule next month if we need to.
Right.
But that's the motion.
Well, that's my
Currently, it's been made and
proposal.
seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Anybody opposed, please raise your hand. Anybody abstaining, please raise your hand. Okay. Other than adjournment, is there any other business? Melanie?
Thursday is the VSBA regional meeting. It is Zoom. So whoever should and could attend. We're going over what the new governance standards.
Yep.
We'll be quickly voting for our rep. Jim is up. And I believe you're running again. Yay, right?
What
Running
time?
again.
And
Nobody's
then,
running
and
the,
then,
nobody's running the meeting, so you know,
yeah, it's great.
fun from that perspective.
For like 20 minutes, and then it'll be turned over to VSBA, and they'll go through the governance standards with us.
Which it is good, the, the governance
Yes.
standards are required of us and starts in next July, but starting to think about those now is a good, talk about training.
Right, we want to train. And I believe you have to sign up online if you have not already. So you get the packet and everything then.
Any questions about that for either Melanie or Jim? Okay. Any other business?
Move.
Okay.
Ben.
Oh, Ben.
Just very quickly, the VSBA annual meeting, I think there was a request to just notify Celeste if we were interested in going, but I'm just curious if there are others in the board that are intending to attend that.
If you do intend to attend and you've told Celeste, could you just raise your hand to get some idea here?
I'm not confirmed.
I haven't notified Celeste yet, but I'm
Okay,
hoping to.
please
attend,
do.
so.
Good.
Okay.
It's good stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
I just don't know if I can take school off
Okay.
to do it again.
All right, Dick
Move
has a
for adjournment.
motion, move to adjourn, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Jim. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Anybody opposed, please raise your hand. Anybody abstaining? Okay, that appears to pass unanimously. It does pass unanimously, and we're adjourned at 8:38.
Right.
Please don't leave without filling out the